starting the session. Subrai to start.
Good morning, one and all. I am Subiraidu. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, who is going to deliver lecture on elucidating the ancient wisdom and universalism in fourth world literature. Professor Armstrong is a distinguished speaker. He is a MA, MPhil, PG, PGCTE, PhD, Head Department of English, University of Madras, Chairperson, School of English and Foreign Languages, Chairperson, Board of Studies in English, ex officio member in the Academic Council, University of Madras. His field of specialization is Canadian First Nations literatures and cultural studies. He published 2 books and edited 2 books. Professor Armstrong published 27 papers in national and international journals. He presented papers in 71 conferences in India and abroad. He coordinated 8 national and 6 international level seminars and served as nodal officer for TRB training programs for assistant professors in English and organized 5 refresher courses for assistant professors in English. Professor Armstrong guiding 6 PhD students and 15 students were awarded PhD degree. He was a member of Senate of the University of Madras. He is a member of Planning Board, Periyar University. He was awarded Fulbright Nehru Visiting Associate Professorship in 2009-2010 to teach a course titled Indian Tamil Dalit Women and Canadian Women's Writings, a Comparative Perspective at the Department of Native American Students, University of California, Davis, United States of America. He received Shastri Canadian Fellowship to complete doctoral thesis at the University of Guelph, Canada during 1999-2000. Professor Armstrong awarded visiting conference fellowship to visit McGill University, Montreal, Canada, to present a paper at a binational conference in 2007. He is a coordinator, Center for Canadian Studies, University of Madras. He is a member, Indian Association for Canadian Studies. He is a member, Association for Canadian Studies in the United States of America. Professor Armstrong is a member, Center for Studies in Social Justice at the University of Windsor, Canada. He is a member, South Indian American Studies Network. He is a member, Indian Association for Studies in Australia, served as a member of the editor to board for the book collector speeches for Sri Surjit Singh Barnala, His Excellency, the Governor of Tamil Nadu, published by University of Madras. He is a guest editor of Human Rights Global Focus from April 2011. Thank you, sir. It's over to Dr. Koteswara, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Subrai, for introducing introduction about the speaker, Mr. Armstrong Garu. And it's my pleasure inviting Mr. Armstrong ji to deliver his talk on fourth world writing, a Canadian perspective. I hope all the participants are ready, eagerly ready to learn something on fourth world literature. So it's time for Mr. Armstrong ji. I would like to invite, and the Department of English in particular, Krishna University in general, sir, inviting you a warm welcome. Thank you, sir, for giving me this opportunity, and thank you for all the participants. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dear Professor Vice Chancellor of Krishna University, Register of Krishna University, Machilipatnam, Professor Rajshekhar Pateti, Vice Chancellor of Acharya Nagarjuna University, who was instrumental in organizing this very useful, very relevant webinar on fourth world writing. Professor Koti Sararao, who has been taking a lot of efforts to organize this webinar. Dear Professors K.N. and also faculty from K.B.N. College, Professor Jahir, Professor Sumant, faculty and students, research scholars from Krishna University and also other parts of India, and my dear PG student friends. I first of all thank Professor Rajashekhar Pateti for referring my name to the organizers for this webinar. Professor Rajashekhar Pateti is an inspiring faculty, not only in Andhra Pradesh and also in the many parts of India, because he was instrumental in organizing many conferences related to fourth world writing. And he also visited Canada and America. We were together in many conferences related to Native American studies in America. So in that connection, the fourth world concept was popularized by Professor Rajshekhar Pateti, because he is also editing a journal amidst his very busy academic schedules. So his journal, Fourth World Writing, is very popular in many universities in Tamil Nadu also. And Dr. Rajshekhar is also a very good research guy. Even after assuming office as Vice Chancellor, he is very busy guiding students and conducting PhD Viva. So such a inspiring professor is a great gift to India. So the organizers of the conference must be, must be thanked, because the theme of the conference is extremely relevant at this pandemic atmosphere. So all of us are isolated, but yet we are virtually together. So this is a great opportunity for all of us to meet and then discuss, to share some of the ideas related to fourth world writing. I think Professor Rajshekhar Pateti might have introduced you, the origin, development of fourth world writing. So some of the examples might be kind of repetition, but don't worry, because this is a new area. So it's better to be familiar with some of the concepts that we are going to discuss in this webinar now. I request Prabhakar, technical support, to screen my PPT. I also request admin to unmute all, because I hear a lot of noise. So I request you to unmute all, please. Prabhakar, can you present my PPT? Okay. Can you hear me, sir, all of you? Hello? Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, very good.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the word, first of all, we go to what is fourth world. The original indigenous people, those who existed before European, or other colonizers invaded, occupied, or otherwise conquered and settled their homelands were called Fourth World people. For instance, each and every country in this world, they have lot of people. Prabhakar, I hear a lot of noise. Could you please unmute them, please? Prabhakar, Mr. Prabhakar, Prabhakar, can you hear me?
Sir, we can hear
Good.
you.
Yeah, please, can you please unmute because I have a lot of noise.
Background sound is disturbing.
Can you hear the lot of background noise, Prabhakar?
Yes, sir.
Kindly take care, otherwise it is very difficult. Hello, Prabhakar?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, very good. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, the fourth world literature. Am I clear now, Prabhakar? Voice is clear, very low or something? Is clear?
No, sir. Clear, clear.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So, the fourth world literature is the written work of native people living in a land that has been taken over by non-natives. See, if you take many European countries or post-colonial countries like Africa, Canada, or Australia, or many countries in South America, all these countries have indigenous population. So the indigenous population, have different names in different countries. For instance, if you take Canada, because my focus will be more on Canada, I already informed the organizers that I am going to have Canadian focus in this fourth world. Of course, I will touch upon many countries, but my focus will be more on Canadian examples. Because I am familiar with the Canadian native people and who created the concept of fourth world in collaboration with Native American studies in Canada only. Even the very word was popularized by many Canadian native scholars in this world. So interconnection, I would like to have this Canadian perspective. So if you take Canada, there are more than 42 tribal or native or First Nations groups. So each one, they claim that nativity or indigeneity is very, very deep in their culture, language, and also in their storytelling and everything. If you go to America, many Native American friends and scholars, they also created the concept of fourth world in order to assert their originality or they want to claim that they are the original inhabitants of both South and North America because the reason is only after the advent of Christopher Columbus and before him many explorers when they visited America, many of them were like decimated. Many of them were culturally destroyed, and physically they were assassinated. But now all these memories of the past have come and they have been theorized in the concept called fourth world writing. So all of us know, that fourth world is nothing but it is not like postponing their indigeneity from one world to other world. It is not like that. Even in the first world also, there are fourth world people. The reason is, you take the native people of America or aboriginals of Australia, they are now called First Nations of Australia, not aboriginals. Prabhakar, Yeah, thank you. Because there was one line, you have to remove that line. Please remove this window away from the shared application. No, so that line has to be removed. Can you remove, or shall I try? Okay, like Native people and our First Nations of Australia, we also have Maoris of New Zealand. Maoris of New Zealand. We also have First Nations. Thank you, Prabhat. Thank you. Try to remove that. First Nations of Canada. In India, we have Dalits and tribes, and they are all considered to be as peoples of the fourth world. Peoples of the fourth world. Okay. In simple words, the description of the fourth world tends to fall into generalities, as it is often used to define any community that is marginalized economically and politically. So they may be categorized as fourth world people. The consciousness of the fourth world is the result of the constant efforts of Aboriginal representatives in Canada and also in North America. In many places in North America, many scholars came together and then they wanted to theorize the fourth world writings. I think we have this very good scholar, George Manuel. George Manuel is the most powerful and revered Indigenous leader of Canada. He advocated the political unification of Indigenous people across the globe by the formation of the Fourth World Movement. So George Manuel, you have to remember when you think of Fourth World writing, we have to remember George Manuel is an unforgettable name. And I think Professor Rajshekhar also might have referred to this scholar, Adam Shoemaker. Adam Shoemaker is an Australian writer. So he provided a comprehensive account of Fourth World writing. One of his famous books is Black World and White Page, Aboriginal Literature. So this book, George Manuel is an example from Canada. Adam Shoemaker is an example from Australia. So I take one moment to let all of you know that the Department of English, University of Madras, has a center called Australian Study Center. So we have started, webinar series. So far we have conducted 3 webinars. One from Gonzalez was there, and Professor and also Professor Rajshekhar also posted the writer online. And we also, Peter Dree was there. And yesterday we hosted other writer, Rashida Murphy from Australia. So like that, we are hosting lot of writers from Australia also. I request all of you to join us on the 17th of November. We have another writer on 17th November. I will send you the details also. Okay, so Adam Shoemaker is another example for fourth world writing from his book titled Black World's White Page, Aboriginal Literature. He is the best example from Australia. Next writer, very popular in the fourth world writing is Gordon Brotherston. So Gordon Brotherston, he argued that American continent was identified as the fourth world. Because it explored landscape and chronologies of the world using indigenous sources as primary text in his famous Book of the Fourth World, reading the Native Americas through their literature. This is the next important book that we have to bear in mind for understanding Fourth World wisdom. Okay, you can ask me what this book is about. So this book, has two important contributions. Number one, this book tries to challenge the inherited linguistic privileging of the script as espoused in Derrida's half grammatology and Levi-Strauss's structural framework. So Levi-Strauss also mentioned about the indigenous population in his book, but unfortunately, it was not clearly, explored. So this book also illustrates through the literary sources of the people of Native America a coherence and continuity of the fourth world. So Protestant's book has these twin focus, that is very, very important to remember. So far I have introduced George Manuel from Canada, Adam Shoemaker from Australia, and then George Protestant from Native American side. Okay, so some of the fourth world scholars, including Professor Rajshekhar and myself and other scholars in India, we would like to initiate a historical use of the term cultivated in a series of world system classifications. For instance, we take Karl Marx because he drew a world division based on analysis of the organization of capital and its monopolistic tendencies in late capitalism. So that also informed the contemporary discussion of imperialism. So the imperialism and also some of the concepts related to capitalism were all to be interrogated using the fourth world theories and the concepts. So as theoretical and historical arguments regarding the fourth world to find the basis in studies that privilege the sources, a more complex horizon of understanding and practice has been ascertained. A corpus of recent works on Native American literature has posed theoretical and practical challenge to different fields of study. So the emergence of fourth world writing in many countries resulted in familiarizing many of the writings which have been marginalized for many reasons. So the emergence of fourth world writings in this world created a space for asserting the identity of the oppressed population in this world. So the fourth world provides a contribution to the understanding, relate, and also thinking and feeling that allow for deeper and more thorough excavations central to the analysis of post-colonial studies. Of course, it is not related to post-colonial studies because fourth world writing is there even before the arrival of Europeans in this world. So it is very difficult to bring post-colonial theories, but that is don't get confused with post-colonial theories with fourth world concepts because that is totally different. Because if you take one writer like Thomas King from Canada, he says, it is very difficult to bring post-colonial studies to understand the native writings in Canada because native writings were there even before the arrival of the Europeans. So we cannot bring post-colonial theories to understand. I am very clear to understand native writing or fourth world writing. No connection between these two because fourth world is totally different from post-colonial studies. Okay, next writer I would like to introduce here is Anthony Hall. He illustrates how histories of contact between indigenous and Euro-American communities for capitalism is critical documents which are also foundational document for post-colonial societies. If you take this book, The American Empire and the Fourth World, The Bowl with One Spoon is another powerful book to unpack, to decipher the theories that have been promoted through post-colonial studies. Because Anthony Hall's for fourth world theories. As I mentioned, just a few minutes back about Thomas King. So Thomas King is a very powerful writer in Canada. He's a native writer. He was also into the Canadian radio also. He was responsible for popularizing many of the native stories in the media in Canada. Thomas King was a novelist also. He wrote Medicine River. He also wrote, Truth and Breakwater. He was also a short story writer. So Thomas King is a very popular short story writer and also He is also known for this famous essay, Godzilla versus Post-Colonial. It is also available online. So this essay by Thomas King foregrounds the alternative terms to describe native literature. Instead of post-colonial theories and other concepts to understand native writing, Thomas King says we have to dismiss post-colonial theories because post-colonial theories will not help to understand native writing. So he comes up with alternative terms like tribal writings, interpositional writing, polemical writing, and associational writing. So these are the four alternative terms used by Thomas King in his essay Godzilla versus Postcolonial. So the key argument in this essay is Godzilla is an imaginary animal. Similarly, post-colonial theories are also imaginary in nature because post-colonial theories cannot help to understand native writings in Canada. So that is the point Thomas King would like to make in this essay, Godzilla versus post-colonial. So let me explain what is tribal literature in Canada. If you go to Canada, Canada has a lot of tribal languages. Some of the writings are within a tribe. Okay, it is not known to people like me or people who speak English language in Canada itself. So these literatures are shared exclusively by members of that particular community and literature that is presented and retained in a native language. So you cannot or I cannot understand the kind of native language. So it is virtually invisible outside its community. For instance, Thomas King gives one example, the Gopi. The Gopi is an example for a tribe who takes great pains in limiting access to parts of the literature only to members of their immediate community. So it is tribal literature is literature written in tribal language only for their community. It is not going to be shared by the particular people who created tribal study literature in Canada. So example is the Gopi. Okay, I go to the next term, polemical writing. Okay, so polemical writing is nothing but it is written in native language or in English language. It's bilingual. It can be in native language or it can be in English language or French. All of you know very well. Canada has two languages. One is, give me 1 second. One is English and the second language is French. So when literatures produced in English is called Anglophone literature in Canada. The literature produced in French is called Francophone literature in Canada. Okay, so we have Francophone writings, we have Anglophone writings, and we have native writings, and we also have immigrant writings in Canada. Okay, these are the four major writings in Canada. So let us focus more on the native writing. Okay, so the second example given by Thomas King is polemical literature. So polemical literature concerns itself with the clash of native and non-native cultures, or with the championing of native values over non-native values. Okay, so literatures that highlight the clash between native and non-native, and also the clash of values, native and non-native values, will be called polemical writing. Example Thomas King is giving. Howard Adams' book Prison of Grass is an example for polemical literature in Canada because this book chronicles the imposition of non-native expectations and insistencies on native communities and the methods of resistance employed by native people in order to maintain both their communities and cultures. Okay, so for the first tribal writings, I told the example of the Gopi Indians. Okay. Thomas King, second example is polemical literature. For this example is Howard Adams' Prison of Grass. Okay. I got a third concept, interquisitional literature, given by Thomas King. So native writings in Canada has a third type. So this term is used to refer to the part of native literature which is a blending of oral literature and written literature, or oral literature and graphic literature. So mixing, blending to oral form and written form. Okay. So there are books like Harry Robinson, Write It on Your Heart is an example for interquisitional literature. Why? So this book interfuses the oral syntax into written mode. Suppose if you take this book, oral, this book is an example for interquisitional studies because when you open this book, Harry Robinson requests the readers to read these poems aloud, so that the writers will get the the feeling of oral text of the native people in North America. So that is an example for interquisitional literature. The next example, last example is associational literature. So what is associational literature? It is nothing but this is a body of literature that has been created for the most part by contemporary native writers. It possesses a series of attributes that help to give it a form. It most often describes a native community that may also describe a non-native community. Example is Basil Johnston's book Indian School Days. Second example is Ruby Silverjack's Honor the Sun, are the good examples of associational literature because these books are authored by contemporary writers for the understanding of non-native and other readers in this world. Okay, so that was Thomas King. Next, I go to Rita Jo. So Rita Jo, as you know, many of you might have heard of Rita Jo. So Rita Jo is a Mi'kmaq poet. She was born and spent her childhood on a Mi'kmaq reserve. So reserve is a term used in government in Canada to refer to the chunk of lands given by the government for rehabilitating native population in Canada. So that land is called reserve. Okay, many of the native people are away from the urban spaces. They are living in reserves in the name of rehabilitating them. They are all there in the reserves. Okay. Okay. See, Rita Jo lived in one of the reserves in Canada. She lived with foster families after her mother's death when she was just 5 years old. See, in Canada, you might have seen, you might have come across in books about foster homes. Okay, so foster homes are built by the government in order to rehabilitate the native children. In foster homes, in foster schools, people are admitted, people who lost their parents, sometimes in the name of civilizing them. They have also built residential schools. Okay, in Canada, in Australia, we have stolen generation, correct? In Canada, we have foster homes and residential school system where the native children are separated from their parents, and they are all educated in the name of civilizing them or in the name of educating them. Okay. In that, one of the foster homes, Joe recalled being told constantly at the residential school, "You are no good." Okay, "You are no good," always discouraging them. So Rita Jo began writing herself to challenge such negative messages. So in order to do away the negative stereotyping, which she encountered again as an adult in the books her own children were reading. Okay, so in order to bring out the alienation that happened in residential schools, Rita Jo became very powerful writer. You you can have this as a powerful example for like the kind of alienation of native children. Look at this poem. I lost my talk. That's the title of the poem by Rita Jo. I lost my talk, the talk you took away. When I was a little girl at the Shubina Caddy School, that is one of the schools where Rita was admitted. You snatch it away, you snatched it away. I speak like you because she has forgotten the native language. I think like you, I create like you, the scrambled ballad about my world. Two ways I talk, both ways I say, your way is more powerful. So gently I offer my hand unasked. Let me find my talk so I can teach you about me. So this poem is one of the powerful poems by Rita Jo, which talks about how native language, native culture, okay, native storytelling were all destroyed in the name of residential schools in Canada. Okay, so we can summarize this poem like this. This poem may be taught either in a specific Mi'kmaq context or as an introduction to Aboriginal writing, as the points about loss of language, culture, identity, and voice in residential schools pertaining to all Indigenous cultures in Canada. So, if possible, when you get an opportunity to frame syllabus in your colleges or universities, so try to introduce Thomas King and Rita Jo as powerful examples from Canada, because they speak a lot about the loss of native culture in Canada. This poem shows the disempowering effects of the residential schools. See, actually, residential schools were created in order to empower the children. But in the words of Rita Jo, residential schools disempowered native children in Canada. The mentioning of the spoken language about talk should be read metonymically as referring to a way of life vastly different from that of the written culture. Okay? So this problem is also highlighted in this poem, I Lost My Talk. This poem also highlights oral traditions were taken away, silencing the medium of talking in their language as well as the message. So oral literature, oral syntax, oral storytelling were all very powerful among the native population. But unfortunately, residential schools destroyed, silenced the talking, the medium of talking, the medium of orality, as well as the message of the native population. Together with the isolation from family, physical abuse and sexual abuse, the punishment for any other kind of cultural expression, the education created a scrambled ballot. So the education given by the Canadian government for empowering native children has resulted in creating a scrambled ballot. All of us are familiar with scrambled egg in the hotels. Okay. So you can look at the scrambled egg. That is totally different from an omelette. Okay. So look at an education that created a scrambled ballot. So it is scrambled, it is not full. It is destroyed. It is destroyed the entire structure. So we can also say Rita Jo repeats the word talk again and again in this poem. I lost my talk. Look at the title, I lost my talk. Here the talk at the end, although she herself is not talking but writing, she wants to make a point about the continuation of talk in the written word, and thereby a statement about the continuation of a culture despite major disruptions. In the prologue to her memoir, Rita Jo states, my greatest wish is that there will be more writing from my people and that our children will read it. I have said again and again that our history would be different if it had been expressed by us. It's a very, very powerful statement because history in this world is vertical. But writers like Rita Jo would like to go for horizontal history. Don't allow the dominant to write history. If the dominant write history, it will be vertical. But we need a democratic history which is horizontal in nature, which is a reference to Foucault's historical sense. Okay. Okay. So that two writers were from Canada, Thomas King and Rita Jo. Next, I take you to the Maori writings in New Zealand. Okay, that is also is an example for one of the fourth writings. Okay, so when you take Maori of the New Zealand, look at the term New Zealand. The original native word for New Zealand is Evo Tioroa. Evo Tiora means land of the long white cloud in Maori. So New Zealand means what? Land of the long white cloud. Even look at the map of New Zealand, you can have this kind of map in mind. Okay, so New Zealand, the original name for, similarly for Canada also, the original name for Canada is Canada, Kanata. That is the original term for Canada. Similarly, in New Zealand also, which is one of the last countries to be discovered and settled down by human beings because of its distance from other countries and in its isolation. The Maori or the Aboriginal people of the eastern Polynesia, who were the first settlers in New Zealand. So according to the Maori, a person called Kupe is believed to be the first person who discovered New Zealand. So all of you are familiar with Columbus, correct? Who discovered America. And very often the entry of Columbus was highly opposed by the native population even today. Even today, they celebrate anti-Columbus Day in Canada and also in US. When you take New Zealand, here is a person, a Maori person, Kupe. He was the he's believed to be the first person who discovered New Zealand. Okay, so this discovery is different from the discovery of America. So after this, many Polynesians migrated to New Zealand through the canoes, and this incident was named as the Great Fleet. Okay, so the Great Fleet was an example to share the migration of Polynesians to New Zealand. So these people had their own tradition, culture, language, uh, mythology, and art. They had their own tribal groups or iwi, and they divided themselves according to it. Okay, so that is the cultural divisions. Okay, like in North America, in Canada and Australia, oral tradition was predominant and culture and traditional beliefs were revived through storytelling from generation to generation. Okay, one of the important literary features of fourth wall writing is storytelling. Okay, so Maori people are known for storytelling. They remembered all the songs and rituals through continuous oral repetitions. Okay, look at the Maori oral literature. It is tribal recital, songs of the Maori, and also narratives in prose form. Okay, so that is how we can divide Maori oral literature. Okay, so okay, the Maori language is one of the official languages of New Zealand. So New Zealand has to be appreciated because they have accepted the native language as one of the official languages of New Zealand. This never happened in other countries. Okay, so New Zealand is the only country who recognized the Maori language as one of the official languages of. In my opinion, in the world, only New Zealand has set an example to accept Maori language as one of the official languages. The arrival of the Europeans to New Zealand by 17th century made the Maori tribal leaders and the European heads sign a treaty called the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840. See, please note, in many post-colonial countries, the Europeans, they will, arrive and then they will settle. But in the New Zealand case, only the Maori arrived first and the European came later. Okay. So then they went for a treaty called the Treaty of Waitangi in 1840, according to which the culture of Maori and the culture of the Europeans should exist side by side in New Zealand. This is one of the important points I'd like to make. So this is an example for treating the native and non-native equally. If this happens in all countries, then we can avoid a lot of problems. But it never happened in other countries. The Maori people were influenced by the Western language, lifestyle, and culture. They learned English from missionaries, and English speaking and writing Maori population raised almost equal to Europeans in New Zealand. Okay, so the Maori learned English language, the Europeans learned Maori. Okay, in many official meetings also, the Maori song will be recited. I received one or two writers in our department, so they speak in English and they speak in Maori. Okay, so they give a lot of importance for the native language. So the legends of the Maori people can be divided into Maori mythology and Maori tradition. The Maori mythology is an account about natural elements like the sky, the earth, fire, thunder, stars, sea. They are very much attached to nature. Okay, so in all the mythology of Maori, okay, they refer to sky, they refer to the earth, fire, thunder, star, sea. Only Maori people they they think the sky is the father, the earth is the mother. So that kind of concept is there. So there are differences in accounts about the myth from the various tribes, but the source was almost similar in all the forms, like myth about Rangi and Papa, the sky father and earth mother, which always remains are the source of life in the world. Next, I would like to introduce a very, very powerful writer from Maori. I think business scholars, faculty must pay attention to this writer. Her name is Linda Smith. She wrote a book, Decolonizing Methodologies, Research on Indigenous Peoples. Okay, brought out by Z Books, London in 1999. So this book is a powerful book. This book influenced many researchers in the world, particularly Africa. Many scholars started, like practicing the ideas related to research propounded by Linda Smith. Research is probably one of the dirtiest words in the indigenous world's vocabulary. That is the quote from Linda Smith. Why? So, in the words of Linda Smith, researcher is a colonizer, the researched is colonized. So, with that background, I'd like to introduce Linda Smith. So, this line is from the introduction to Linda Smith's book, Search for an Extensive Critique of Western Paradigms of Research and Knowledge from the Position of Indigenous and Colonized Maori Women. Challenges traditional Western ways of research and calls for the decolonization of methodologies and for a new agenda of indigenous research. Linda Smith says decolonization is concerned with having a more critical understanding of the underlying assumptions, motivations, and values that inform research practices. Okay, this book has two parts. Part 1 presents the history of Western research and critiques the cultural assumptions behind research by the dominant colonial culture. Part 2 focuses on setting a new agenda for indigenous research. Okay, part 1 of the book adopts a feminist and critical theory framework and deconstructs the assumptions, motivations, and values that inform Western research practices through exploring the Enlightenment and positivist tradition by viewing Western research as scientific, objective process. Okay, what about research through imperial eyes? Is not just something for the history book and argues that colonialism continues to have a profound impact on indigenous peoples. It provides a reminder that colonial paradigms continue to evolve and to marginalize indigenous groups, that non-indigenous researchers need to consider how their worldview may reinscribe the dominant discourse of the other. Okay, so the world has researchers. Okay, so the researcher is very often the Westerner, correct? So it is very, very difficult to find a non-Westerner as a researcher. You take all the research methodologies that you practice in your classroom. All the research methodology books were authored by the Westerners, correct? You take MLA handbook or AP style or any style or Chicago manual that we do in social science research. So all these authors, all these books were written by the Westerners, correct? But Linda says research is always considered to be the European framework. So where is the non-European framework in research? So this book is an example to show. So there is also a possibility that a non-European can also be a researcher. Okay. So for instance, all Indians are subjected to research. All Africans are subjected to all Australian Aboriginal people or Canadian or South American natives are only objects of research. Suppose if they take up research and then if they do research about themselves, the perspective will totally change, correct? So that is the argument put forth by Linda Tinguish. So the second part of the book targets at indigenous researchers and those working with alongside for indigenous communities. Okay, and it focuses on setting an agenda for indigenous research and addresses along some of the issues currently being discussed among indigenous communities. This part also explores research practices that offer alternatives to Western paradigms and that issue racism, ethnocentrism, and exploitation. The study of development in Maori research, Maori as the research to Maori as the researcher. Okay, so this idea can also be related to all countries. The Indian as the research to Indian as the researcher. Just imagine we are all researchers. We are going to European countries. How will you take up research? Or you are all researchers. You research about India, correct? Just imagine the perspective. So she calls for an alternative academic understanding or to create research through our own perspective. India's research in the eyes of the Indian researcher, which will be different from India to be researched under the perspective of the Westerner, correct? So Linda suggests the people who are not Maori are not precluded from participating in research that has a Kaupapa Maori orientation. So Linda is for advocating a method called Kaupapa Maori orientation. Okay, it means the Maori must have Maori orientation to research about Maori. Okay, that is from New Zealand. Okay, I take India. Okay, if you come to India, mostly our tribes and many of the Dalit uh, uh, groups in India are considered to be indigenous to India. Okay, so all of us know that India is the only country in the whole world where the people are differentiated as high and low by reason of their birth alone. No country in this world marginalizes people in the name of birth. There is no scientific evidence to prove people who, people who are lower, people who are higher in birth. No scientific evidence on this world. If you have any evidence, you can tell us. So, right from the person's birth, inequality is practiced, and the majority are born as low or untouchables in India. This is something peculiar for the Indian continent to divide people based on birth. Can you tell me one country in this world, sir, in this country, people, at birth, people are segregated? If you tell me, I will accept. But this kind of practice in India resulted in losing lot of talent in this world. Because of this division of people by birth, we lost a lot of scholars in this world. We have a lot of problems because of this lower birth and higher birth, correct? So we have to be very, very careful in treating many of us Indians. We should be very, very careful, okay? In treating people, as you or as I wish. So all of you are familiar with the caste system in India, and Dr. Ambedkar was the only person in this world who opposed caste system with his own intellect, with his own readings. Okay, he was the only scholar in the world who created an example for annihilating caste system or any other system that creates oppression in this world. So, exploitation of the socially underprivileged. Socially underprivileged communities and caste suppressors and exploit others. This has naturally led to social tensions and conflicts. Many of the problems in India are based on this social discrimination. All of you know very well. And all of you know the kind of system we have in India. Okay, so there is a necessity of equalization of all castes and communities in this world. Equalization of all castes and communities is the indispensable duty of any civilized government of this country. Prabhakar, am I audible, Prabhakar?
Yes, sir, you are very much audible.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so everyone should have equal opportunities and be treated equally in all respects. A sense of equality and equal status is essential to build a healthy nation, and these things precede the establishment of socialism. Correct? Okay, now in this background, I would like to introduce a great scholar from Tamil Nadu who was responsible for popularizing many of the literary universe of Tamil Nadu in many countries, even during the colonial time, without any technology, without any support from the government. This scholar has created lot of anti-caste movement in Tamil Nadu, who can be considered as one of the important fourth world writers in the world. Many of you might not have been familiar with this person, Ayodhi Dasar in Tamil Nadu, who lived between May 20, 1845 and 1914. He was called Pandit Ayodhidas. He was a popular Siddha physician, a renowned scholar of Tamil language and literature, and was well versed in Pali and Sanskrit languages. He was a polyglot. He knew many languages, including Pali, Sanskrit, English language, including Tamil also. A great leader, an organizational genius, and an inspirational personality. In 1870, he organized the lower caste of the Nilgiris to form Adi Advaita Advaita Nanda Sabha. In 1898, Ayodhya started Sakya Buddhist Society with the generous help from General Alcott of Theosophical Society. The main objective of the organization was to explain the ancestral histories and Buddhist Dhammam to the casteless Dravidians, and through stability in virtue and religious discipline to help them towards progress. So, Ayodhida's argument is this. See, the Dravidian people, including all four South Indian states, had a Dravidian population, correct? So, according to Ayodhidas, the Dravidians are casteless people. They didn't have any caste system in South India. The caste system was an imposed system. In the words of Ayodhidas, the South Indians never had a practice called caste system. Originally, we were all called what? Casteless people. We were all called Buddhist people. Okay, we were called once Buddhist. He uses the word all the Buddhist. Okay, all the Buddhist. We didn't know what was caste. Then what happened? Ayodhya says he argued that the aborigines of Tamilagam, including the Andhra, Telangana, Tamil, okay, Kerala, and some of the people in Sri Lanka and Pondicherry, he argued that the aborigines of Tamilagam were initially Buddhist. Okay, so the Vedas were their moral codes of conduct. The invaders appropriated the term Brahman, which was used traditionally by the Tamils for wise men. Okay, the word Brahman in Tamil means wise men. But Ayodhyadas blamed the Aryans, who later claimed that the Vedas were their own holy books and legalized the caste discrimination and birth ascription. The interpretation of the past or the origin of the future resurgence was an important aspect of Ayodhyadas movement. Okay, so Gail Womack from an American settled in Maharashtra talks about Ayodhyadas like this. Using his scholarship in Pali and Sanskrit languages, Ayodhyadas dates this cultural invasion to around 1200 years. Okay, so 1200 years before, we were all casteless people, no caste discrimination in India. And then Ayodhya says he advocated a form of study of the ideologies which resembles Freudian social ideology, analytical reason as the foundation of an individual psyche and at large the ideology of the society. And he also adopts Marxist critique of hermeneutics, critique of ideology, dominant ideology as false consciousness. And the third one, Habermas's critical hermeneutics, the emancipatory mode of religious and ethical text. Okay, so this project therefore serves Ayodhya's project as the first inevitable step towards the emancipation of the depressed classes. Look at the phrase depressed classes, which at the same time would engender a morally united larger society. Okay, so he adopted Buddhism. Okay, his argument was the Buddhist past became the master key for Ayurvedas to deconstruct the current symbols, rituals, beliefs, and practices. He wanted to reinterpret and reconstruct the entire past in the course of self-emergence and to erect a new sacred canopy. So he wanted to create a Buddhist past, which was true, and he wanted to assert that the original Dravidians were caste people. And then he didn't start with that. He started running journal. Look at this. Oru Paisa Tamilan. That's the name of the journal. Started on 19th June 1907 from Rayapeta, Chennai. So this journal was shipped to many countries, to Philippines, to South Africa. You just imagine in 1907, he started running the journal and he circulated the journal to many countries, including Kolar Goldfield, KGF in Karnataka also. Okay, so like that, this journal became very, very popular during 1990s. So Orupesa Tamilan analyzed current events and also articles on women's education and also the essential commodities and book reviews. All these were there in Orupesa Tamilan. Okay, and it was popular with the Tamilians living in the Madras presidency and also outside the state. It was during this period that ideas like anti-Brahmanism, Dravidian ideology, rationalism were discussed by all sections of the people in the presidency. So many of you must know Ayodhyadas was one of the fundamental intellectuals in Tamil Nadu for influencing people like Periyar, Anna, and other Dravidian, leaders were very much influenced by Ayodhyadas. Okay, his Dalit political discourse dominated the columns in the Tamilan. So Odupesa Tamilan became Tamilan later. These brought out a systematic argument of the first ever depressed class ideology in Tamil Nadu. Okay, Ayodhyadas and the indigenous identity. So Ayodhyadas declared that the depressed classes are the original inhabitants and they should be designated as Adi Tamil and original Tamils. Tamils today are known for their passionate adherence to Tamil language, Tamil nationality and Tamil nationalism. It will not be an exaggeration to say that the foundations for the fierce nationalism of the Tamil people was laid by Pandit Ayodhyadas. Many of you must make a note of this. Okay, so next I go to Africa. So far we have discussed the Canadian understanding of football, okay, and also the Maori understanding, and also Indian Dalits and tribal understanding of football. Now I go to African continent where we have a researcher called Bagali Chilisa, who was very much influenced by Linda Smith of New Zealand, okay, the Maori scholar. Because Bagel Chilisa wrote this book, Indigenous Research Methodologies, correct? So this book, Post-Colonial Indigenous Feminist Theory and Research Methodologies, refers to the process of critique, decolonization, indigenization of Euro-Western methodologies. Okay, so this book theorizes methodologies that are informed by the theoretical perspectives. The world views of third world feminism, African feminism, black feminism, borderland mestiçade feminism, and all the marginalized non-Western feminisms are discussed in this book, Indigenous Research Methodologies by Vegal Chilisa. Chilisa is from University of Botswana. She was responsible for popularizing the African natives
Hey,
research methodologies. Correct. Okay. Now, Nagel Chelisa gives four contested themes. She refers to Shailaja panel in 2009. Shailaja panel, quoted by Bengal Chilisa, provides four contested themes that come from a comparison of gender theory from the Western Europe and America with those from the locations within Africa and South Asia. Okay, two paradigms. Okay, number one, Western Europe and America. It is contested with Africa and South Asia. Okay, using gender theory. What are the four contested themes in this book, according to Shailaja panel? An argument by non-Western feminists for a deconstruction of universalization within gender theory. Please note, the feminism in Europe and America is different from feminism in India and Asia. Okay, other countries, correct? Similarly, the feminism in America is different from feminism in Africa. Okay, similarly, gender theories are totally as an argument by non-Western feminists for a deconstruction of universalization within gender theory. The first contested theme. Second theme is centers on the denial by Western feminists of non-Western women's power within indigenous relational worlds that celebrates motherhood, sisterhood, and friendship. Third contestation is how non-Western feminists and the post-colonial indigenous feminists have used post-structural deconstructional methods to voice their discontent with the hegemonic intellectual apparatus. How African and Asian feminists and other non-Western feminists aim to move gender research towards post-colonial and indigenous approaches. Correct? So indigeneity is very, very important. Indigenous approach in everything is very, very important now. Okay? So don't stop with post-colonial theories, post-colonial in everything. Okay, so that was the argument of Shailaja panel quoted by Linda, Bagel Chilisa. Okay. Next, I take you to South America. Okay. How do South Americans look at post-war writing? As indigenous people, we have seen in India, Canada, Australia, and also New Zealand. We also have native people in South American continent. Okay, so South American continent, South American scholars, particularly women, has come up with one of the important concepts called literary device called testimony. Many of you might have heard of this term testimonial. It's a Spanish term for testimony. Okay, so this usage of the term originally from Latin America, the testimonialist or writer or teller of the testimony gives his or her personal testimony directly addressing a specific interlocutor. Testimonial, as a genre of literature, thrived in Latin America during the second half of the 20th century. It is a potential source of information from and about a marginalized perspective. You may ask me, what is the meaning of testimony? Okay, the meaning is this: it is a witness narrative. It is a witness testimony. Okay, witness narrative written during three occasions: during war, during revolution, and during oppression. Please note, war, revolution, oppression. These are the three occasions where testimonials are created. And all of you know very well, South America is known for these three words: war, oppression, and revolution. Correct? Now, testimonial relays historical events using literary devices such as metaphor, dialogue, or poetry from the perspective of either a witness or participant. It is a kind of hybrid between historical narratives and literature. It is a socially and politically charged Latin American narrative of witnessing. It has had an enormous impact on the definition and meaning of literature in Latin America. It presents multicultural heterogeneity as being internal to the identity of people. But in Latin America, many of you might have known, but it refers to countries in the Americas where the Latin-derived languages are spoken. That is Romances. Okay, the region was home to many indigenous peoples and civilizations like the Aztec, Inca, Maya. Like the Indus Valley in India, Latin America is known for three civilizations. What are they? Aztec, Inca, and Maya. During the 15th and 16th centuries, before the arrival of the Europeans. The actual term Latin America was coined in France under Napoleon III. Highly developed civilizations flourished at various times and places such as in the Andes and Mesoamerica. The inhabitants of Latin America are of a variety of ancestors, ethnic groups, and races, making the region one of the most diverse in the world. For some, this is for not for all. Some students, they may not know, but I just want to share what are the prominent Latin American countries: Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Colombia, Cuba, El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Puerto Rico, Uruguay, Venezuela. Okay, these are some of the countries. Okay, now I go to the theories of testimony. Okay, George Rice defines testimonial as an authentic narrative told by a witness who is moved to narrate by the urgency of the situation. I told you war, oppression, revolution. Okay, so George Eudice emphasizes popular oral discourse, the witness portrays his or her own experience as a representative of a collective memory and identity. Truth is summoned in the cause of denouncing a present situation of exploitation and oppression or exorcising and setting aright official history. In India also, I think Sharmila Rage edited a book called Dalit Testimonies. Okay? Based on the Latin American experience, Dalit women experience is compared with the Latin American women, and then their testimonials were collected by a Maharashtrian scholar, Sharmila Rage. Okay? Okay, testimonial lacks definitive author. Instead, we hear a narratorial voice mediated through an interlocutor. Testimonial lacks definitive author. Okay, no interlocutor. The protagonist of a testimonial is a speaker of who does not conceive of her himself as an extraordinary, but as an allegory for many, a representation of a people's collective memory. The self expressed in testimonial cannot be defined in individual terms. It is a collective self engaged in a common struggle. The speaker of testimonial makes no claims to universal representation or emancipation. It seeks emancipation and survival within specific and local circumstances. Testimonial produces knowledge based on subjective experience, not as empirical historical facts, but as strategy of cultural survival and persistence. Professor Kodiswara is there, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, can I have 10 minutes more?
Yes, sir. You can carry on, sir. You can carry on. No problem.
Am I audible? Any problem?
No, sir. It's audible. It's very, very audible. You can carry on.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, sir.
Okay, testimonial literature may include autobiography, autobiographical novel, oral history, memoir, confession, diary, writing, interviews, eyewitness report, life history, novel or testimonial, non-fiction novel, or factographic literature. So, my dear friends, please know the 21st century will have a new type of literature that is called testimonial literature. Please note, this term is an alternative term for European literature. So testimonial literature has, like literature with European perspective, we have alternative understanding of literature now. So testimonials have become very, very popular now in the world. So testimonial literature may include all these types I have mentioned now. Okay. So please note, testimonials have three types. Number one, individual testimonial. And number two, collective testimonial. Number three, novel law testimonial. Number four, fourth one also is digital testimonial. I repeat, types of testimonials. Number one, individual testimonial. Number two, collective testimonial. Number three, novel law testimonial. Number four, digital testimonial. Okay? So this documental literature is in certain ways different from slave narratives and ethnographic literatures. Okay? So Africa had slave narratives. I think many of you might have known this. And North American and other immigrant writers created ethnographic literatures. Okay. Now, testimonial literature is very, very popular now in South America and North America. Okay. So, example, we can say things fall apart is cited as a basis of theoretical implications of testimonials. I take Things Fall Apart because Things Fall Apart, authored by Chinu Achebe, is not an example for testimonial, but it is cited as basis of theoretical implications of testimonies because Things Fall Apart is written with an insider's perspective. Who is that insider? Chinu Achebe. Chinu Achebe is an insider. He is an eyewitness to the culture of Igbo people. Correct? So, but when you take the Heart of Darkness, that Heart of Darkness is written with white perspective. You cannot equalize Heart of Darkness with the Things Fall Apart because the insider is very, very important. Like, Linda Teguvai says, the researcher of Maori must be a researcher. The presenter of the culture should not be an outsider, like the Heart of Darkness written by a white person. Things Fall Apart is an example for testimony because the insider's perspective of one's own culture is very, very important. The birth of the genre can be dated to the mid and the late 1960s, Latin America, Cuba in particular. Cuba can be considered as one of the countries popularized testimonies. This form of writing is closely associated to revolutionary developments. Testimonial literature in Latin America is distinguished for its non-literary quality. The individuals stand testimony to the prejudice practiced by the society. So if you take European literature, we have epics and other things. All the heroes, Shakespearean tragedians were all kings, princes, and then the ambassadors or a great warrior. But if you take testimonial literature, the heroes and heroines are ordinary people. Okay, testimonial literature talks about the extraordinary experience of ordinary people. That is very, very important. Okay, I can give you some examples for testimonies. Okay, you may ask me, sir, tell me some examples. Correct? Look at the examples. Mario Queiroz. She wrote Las Dias. So some of the Spanish titles are there, but don't worry about that. 1984 is an account of the life of a Guatemalan guerrilla fighter. Okay, so you can read this story. It is available in English language. Take second writer Elena Poniatowska, title Fortio es el Silencio, Latin spelling, Spanish spelling. It is a collage of voices bearing witness to political and social realities of contemporary Mexico. Next example, hear my testimony. Maria Teresa Tula, human rights activist from El Salvador, other South American country, edited by Lynn Stephen, the testimony of an exiled political activist who worked with the group Comrades, okay, to secure basic human rights in El Salvador. So, note the countries El Salvador, Mexico, Guatemala, all these countries produce testimonials. Not only this, look at the examples for Latin American women testimonials. What are they? Rigoberta Menchu from Guatemala, written by Rigoberta Menchu, is a very, very powerful testimonial that one must read. And other from Bolivia, we have Domitila Barrios, title In It. Third example, Don't Be Afraid, Brinjo. A Honduran woman speaks from the heart. The story of Elvia Alvarado from Honduras. I Survived, Claribel Alegria from Nicaragua. These are all very, very powerful pieces of writing which serve as an example for testimonials. Correct? Okay, what happens in testimonial writing? We can summarize what is there in testimonial writing. Testimonial literature is a denunciation or the condemnation of the discrimination experienced at every level. So it is like anti-caste writings in India. Latin America produced anti-discrimination writings. Anti-discrimination writings. Margaret Randall calls testimonial literature as a powerful example of resource literature. What literature? Resource literature. Collective identity is predominant in female gender testimonials. If you take female gender testimonials, so they are known for what? They are known for collective identity. Nancy Stapota Sternberg says, this genre exclusively to women, as a number of authors have asserted that the testimony of women is more true than testimonials in general. So Nancy Stapota says, this form of testimonial is very much akin to women's writing. Example, I Rigobata Menchu, written by Rigobata Menchu, is an example for collective identity. Why I quote, I would like to, Rigobata Menchu says, I would like to stress that it is not only my life, it is also the testimony of my people. My story is the story of all four Gautamalans. Gautamala is a country. My personal experience is the reality of the whole people. Please note, this quotation is an example for collective identity. Rigobata Menchu's story is not only her story, that is the story of many women in Gautamala. Okay? Testimonials contextualize the intricate tapestry of the lives. It provides a glimpse into their milieu throw light on the collective importance of the work as women of color in Latin America. Testimonial expresses their shared experience in a society that has attempted to render them invisible. So, testimonials makes invisible people visible. I told you testimonials talks about extraordinary experience of ordinary people. Similarly, testimonials give invisibility of the people visibility. One of the classical texts edited by Ines Fernandez Avila, Telling to Live, Latin feminist testimonials, received the Gustavus Meyer Center for the Study of Bigotry and Human Rights Award as one of the best 10 books of 2002. I know this editor, Ines Hernandez Avila, because I was there in the University of California, Davis campus. She was my host, and she talks about testimonials, and I have this book with me. So Ines Fernandez Avila is a very, very powerful activist and professor of Native American Studies in California University Davis campus. So she only edited this book, and she told me how difficult it was to edit women, the experience of 50 Latin American women in India. This book is one of the few documented testimonials. It renders testimonials through the autobiographical narrative, short stories, poems, and dialogues. The book is divided into 4 sections. Introduction consists of personal essays, poems, short stories, and sometimes family photographs. Okay, so in the introduction, the title goes like this: Epimitos Gordidos, or Secret Little Papers, takes its name from the idea that each woman has had to keep guarded secrets, secret roles, tucked away in safe and secret places. The women detail their coming to education through the hard work and progressive or even socialist standpoints of family members. They owe their deepest debts emotionally and intellectually to their mothers and grandmothers. Collective testimony, according to Aurora Morales, brings about healing through consciousness raising. Latinos who have contributed to this text are workers, activists, theorists, and writers within community. There are also proficient oral historians, ethnographers, literary scholars, creative writers, psychologists, and testimoniadoras, but who had never explored their diversity. Okay, this text, the women tell it like it is. That is the telling to believe. Okay, the words that we read, the thoughts and feelings they contemplated in isolation. This book gives a glimpse of how the Latinas evoke identity and cultural pride. The Latinas identity constructs the ethnic subject in terms of race, origin, language, culture, and socially disposed. Okay, major themes in the text telling to live are family relationship, social and geographical places, the female archetypes of Latin American history, the construction of the self in childhood, and the act of writing self. The book defines oneself within the community, not as a separate individual, but a self in relation to our ethnic roots. Tends to be an important characteristic of much of the literature written by women of color. Okay, so this book also challenges the mainstream, but meet with outrage. Their lives give voice to the memories, relationships, and events, and it has helped them survive many centuries of disaster. They have specific institutions, ceremonies, and community organizations, land, families, clans, bands are all seen as gifts from the Creator and have a sacred and spiritual dimension in this book. Testimonial writing has become a political act of survival for those who on the boundaries or at the margin. Okay. Last bullet point: her story is history, reality, myth combined. History is written with a patriarchal perspective, but history they want to change as her story, not his story. Okay. The last book I would like to introduce in this webinar is Methodology of the Oppressed. Okay. So this book again from Latin American country, written by Chela Sandoval, is an example for uh, how one can express kind of research experience, correct? In tune with the books I have mentioned, Linda Trevor Smith from Maori background, and Bagel Tilisa from the South American perspective. We have this author, Chela Sandoval, whose book Methodology of the Oppressed is an example for how one can consolidate and extend what we might call manifestos for liberation. Manifestos for liberation in order to identify and specify a mode of emancipation that is effective within the first world new colonizing global conditions during the 21st century. Correct? In 21st century, this book would like to highlight four important chapters. Number one, foundations in neo-colonial postmodernism. The theory and method of oppositional consciousness in the postmodern world. Third, the methodology of the oppressed, semiotics, deconstruction, meta-ideologizing, democratics, and the differential movement. Last chapter is love in the postmodern world, differential consciousness 3. Okay, So Shayla Sandoval recommends love as the postmodern technique to solve many problems in this world. Okay, that is the last chapter in the book Methodology of the Oppressed by Shayla Sandoval. Correct. I would like to conclude with this note. This is the last slide, and my final note in this webinar is: see, all of us are familiar. Literature has two roles. Number one, to delight and then to teach. That is the traditional theories of literature say literature must delight, must teach. But Portugal writing would like to add a third role to literature. That role is literature can also liberate people. Portable writing says literature has a third role to play in this world. That is, literature must liberate people who are suffering in this world. That is the message of portable writing. That is the wisdom of portable writing. Okay. Thank you so much. Thanks for the opportunity. If you have any questions, please ask.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot for accepting my invitation. I am profusely thankful to you, sir, from the behalf of the Department of English, in particular in behalf of the Krishna University. And sir, yours is very, very informative and interesting session, sir. No doubt at all. Your session and your talk and speech enlightened and illuminated all the participants and many of the scholars. No doubt, sir. I am particularly behalf of myself, I would like to extend my heartfelt thanks for accepting my invitation. Now, I would like to invite Dr. Dilip, head Department of English and Professor Department of English, to conduct a questions session on yesterday's and today's sessions. Thank you, sir, for accepting my invitation, Professor Dilip, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Koteswara sir. And now we are looking forward for the questions because, after the so informative and inspiring talk by Professor Armstrong, I'm sure that there are so many participants eagerly waiting to interact with the professor. So please type your questions in the chat box, and I will represent the questions to Professor Armstrong, and then he will be responding to your questions.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir, there is a question.
From
Yeah,
Ashwini,
sir.
Ashwini is asking
Yeah,
whether
right.
Dalit writings can be considered as portable
Yes,
writing.
sir. Yes, sir.
So my response is this: all the writings of the people from the margins can be considered as portable writing, but still there is a reservation. The reason is, the fourth world theory has been popularized by the Canadian native scholars and the Native American scholars in Native America, and also some of the First Nations Australians in Australia. Okay, so of course we can relate, we can bring some of the fourth world theories to understand Dalit writing, but it is very, very difficult to say fourth world writing is equal to Dalit writing, because Dalit writing has got its own aesthetics. Dalit writings in India is very, very rich. Each state, you take Telangana, you take Andhra Pradesh, you take Tamil Nadu, you take Maharashtra, the experience of Dalits in each and every state is totally similar but different. Okay, so the experience of the Dalits can be taken into account because there are some similar experiences are there in the fourth world writings also. Okay, so we have to include Dalit writings as part of fourth world writing, but there is no scholar in the world who can say that Dalit writing is part of portable writing? Portable writing has come, it is a term. It is a term we all discuss based on the concepts created by Canadian and Native American scholars, but nothing wrong in bringing some theories or using literary theories to understand the Latin American experience. Okay, this is possible to have a kind of healthy discussion in future also. Thank you, Aswini, for the question. Thank you.
Sir, here is the question, and it is by Arjuna Rao,
Yes, sir.
Dr. Arjuna Rao, and he says, Sir, does the fourth world literature have considerable readership? That is his question.
Yeah. See, only now, Dr. Rajshekhar, I think many of you might know, he conducted an international conference. That was the only conference conducted on coastal writing in India, to my knowledge. Okay, but the thing is, there are readers now in Latin American countries. Latin American people, Canadians, Native American scholars, there a lot of research is going on in America, Canada, Australia, in New Zealand. But in India, we just started. In India, we just started. And now we have growing number of scholars. I think after Roshair's conference, I think this is the only webinar, I think, concentrating on coastal writing. Am I right, Kodiswar?
We believe so, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank
Thank
you
you
for the
for
belief.
the,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
sir, great response. And here there is a question from Ms. Pravina, and she is asking, Sir, why are we unable to avoid subjugation and hegemony on Dalits today? So this is a very big question. Anyway, I think we will try to respond for this. Sir, is it clear? Why is the hegemony on the Dalits still continuing in the present day? That is the question from Ms. Pravina.
Can we have another seminar on this, Pravina?
Yeah, really. That's a
The reason is, India is the only country in this world, I told you, where we hierarchize education, we hierarchize experience, basic day-to-day life. Everything has become hegemonic now. The duty of dehegemonizing this type of discrimination is there in all Indians. You take America, the Americans, the American white contributed a lot to liberate the American blacks. Yes or no? Maybe not. But in India, people who suffer must also fight for liberation. That is the sad condition. What is that? They think the suffering is there only for sufferers. See, the sufferers must get relief from the non-sufferers, correct? But unfortunately, people who are oppressed, people who are marginalized, must struggle for liberation using their own, oppressors. But the oppressor must come forward to remove oppression. Correct? The oppressed cannot all the time struggle and then remove oppression. It's very, very difficult. So in that background, we must use education as a tool. We must use education as a tool to remove the hegemony and discrimination. But unfortunately, Indian universities and Indian colleges, again, they have become space for exercising the power and hegemony again in different way. If discrimination takes place in village or in offices, that is one form of discrimination. The same form of discrimination is also there in colleges and universities in a different way. It is there in a different mode. It is there in different form. Okay? If an officer, a professor, or a vice chancellor from some particular community has also undergone similar so hegemony and discrimination has different forms now. Okay, so we have to, all of us must come together to fight against this hegemony and discrimination. Okay, thank you for the question. Yes, Professor Dilip, next question.
Thank you so
Anvil.
much for a detailed response. And here is a response from Ms. Asma Alam. And the response is, sir, can I comment that the fourth world literature addresses the binary between the oppressed and the oppressor, like post-colonialism?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's a good question. But it is not only binaries. Okay, there are many things fourth world writing, tries to address. Binaries are there, but don't relate the binaries from the post-colonial. I already warned you, including me. I also warned myself. It is not all the time post-world theories like the binarism, the good and the evil, the master and the slave. Okay, that kind of binaries are there in fourth world writing also, but fourth world writing does not propagate post-colonial binarism. Please note the theories, the themes, the methodology of fourth world writing are totally different from post-colonial theories. Okay, so binaries are there, but those binaries are not the binaries of post-colonial. They are not from post-colonial binaries. The binaries are created by the creators of fourth world writing. They never try to imitate post-colonial theories, including theories of binaries. Hope I am clear.
Yeah, yes, sir. Here is a response from Mr. Ram Kishan, and his question is, sir, when a certain literature is labeled as Dalit literature, doesn't its interpretation become subjective and deprive the reader to deconstruct the text? So this is a question about labeling some texts as Dalit literature.
It is a very good question.
Yes, sir.
Labeling and naming are all European, method.
Right.
For instance, naming is a politics, labeling is a politics. But without labeling and naming, nothing will take place. Okay, but how to theorize the writings of the Dalits? We have to find out a word. Okay, I told you, Ayodhya sir from Tamil Nadu, the colonial scholar, propounded casteless identity for Dravidians. That's a good move. Okay, we can say, yes, okay. Suppose Dalit writings from today will be called anti-caste writing, correct? And again, you will ask me why the word caste is there. So anyhow, we have to find out some term to collectively identify the writings of the people from the margins, correct? So I told you, fourth world writing promotes anti-discrimination writing. You understand? In India, Dalit writing can be called anti-caste writing. Then the question will come, who will write anti-caste writing? Whether the upper caste authors can go for anti-caste writing, yes or no? So that you have to answer. Okay, Dilip sir, thank you. Next question.
Sir, here is another response from Mr. Chittibabu, and he asks that Sir, do you think that the time has come for the universalization of local literature by breaking the local barriers? And if that is so, do you think that it's happening in India? Or if it is not happening, what can be done for that?
Very good question. So very, I like this question very much. When we talk about globalization and we talk about all technological advancements, okay, we must also think of local. The term local, many of you may have
Yeah.
heard of this.
Port,
Globalizing the local. That is called local. Glo
portmanteau
plus local portmanteau
expression.
word. So now, yes, that's true. So we have to give, see, the Nobel Prize winners once were all from, they projected more of the local universe, correct? The local experience. Local literatures are very important. What we call regional literatures, correct? The regional atmosphere, the local is very important. So that creates a kind of mainstream effect, correct? So we have to promote local culture, regional culture, okay, marginal culture with a global perspective. That is the need of the hour. That is the need of the hour. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, yes, sir. Here is a response from Mr. Milind Thakare, and he is asking Professor G, whether does African literature written by African writers standpoint? Um, I think so. That's how I understand it. It's not
Mm.
very clear, in fact. He has written
Yeah, you see,
hand.
African
Yeah, right.
literatures are authored by the Africans who are black in color. Okay, there are white men living in Africa also. They also write, African writing, correct? But the African black experience is totally different from the African white experience, correct? Because the white men settled in Africa will have different understanding of Africa as a continent, as we read in the Heart of Darkness, correct? But the Africans who write in Africa, like Chinua has a different understanding of his own people, like Igbo people, in things fall apart. Correct? So it is very difficult to say that all African experiences are similar in nature. Okay. So again, we have to go for the local experience, the local author, the local language, the local culture, local storytelling. It may be Africa, or it may be New Zealand, or it may be India. Correct? But all are different because once you expect authenticity, you can expect authenticity only from an insider. Suppose if I want to know about Krishna University, I can read books. I can visit your campus once or twice, but I cannot write a book about Krishna University or and about your city. Yes, only you are the master. You are an expert about your culture, your campus, your geography, your locality. Correct. So the insider will create authenticity, not the outsider.
Yeah,
Yes, please.
somebody has given the example of James Cutsey here.
Ah, yes, yeah,
Yeah,
very good, yeah,
very
yeah.
timely
You
example.
can read that, sir, please. You can
Yeah,
read
yeah.
that.
Yes, sir. It seems that we are exhausted with all the questions, and
Okay.
we are very thankful for a
Yeah,
very interactive session, question and answer session at the end of your very informative and inspiring presentation.
thank you.
I now I yeah, sir. Now I request Dr. Koteswarao sir to take over the mic.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for accepting my invitation to handle the question hour session, sir. It's my
My pleasure, sir.
so, sir. As far as all the questions are concerned, all the participants might have got a lot of information from your talk and speech, sir, today and even yesterday. So, thank you, sir, for extending your cooperation even in responding to the questions of the participants. Now, I would like to invite Professor Usha, Principal, Krishna University Campus College, to address the gathering and participants as valedictory address. Thank you, Madam, for accepting my invitation.
Thank you very much, sir. Am I audible to you all?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you are
Yes,
audible,
ma'am.
very much
Yes,
audible.
ma'am.
Carry on.
Uh, we have come to a close of the two-day national webinar uh, organized by the Department of English, Krishna University. I'm very happy that Professor Rajshekhar and Professor Armstrong have taken up the idea of fourth world literatures on their shoulders and have very beautifully given us the basics, the history of fourth world literatures, the contemporary themes, techniques, and Professor Armstrong has gone one step forward and he has spoken very resourcefully about the new 21st century contemporary literatures such as testimonial literatures, which is very interesting. And I also found that Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart, can be taken as a basis. So today I'm really happy to listen to Professor Armstrong after a very long time and understand these new techniques of rethinking the English canon. Fourth world literatures is a very wide area of literary studies, and we need to concentrate on the native Canadian, native American, Australian, New Zealand, and Indian literatures if we need to understand the theories. So, as Professor Armstrong has given us many critical ideas, theories on fourth world literatures, I was very much, interested in reading Linda Smith's interpretation of Maori literatures and her, interpretation on research and contemporary writing. Thank you, Professor Armstrong, for your enlightening and interesting presentation on the Maori literatures. I know you have done a lot of research on these literatures, so that is really helpful for our research scholars. I think so. Krishna University is organizing the research coursework for the research scholars last month and this month, and we have continued with this idea. So our literature scholars are really, they have gained much knowledge from this area of literary studies. Uh, when we speak of fourth world literatures, we also need to understand the native literatures of India, the tribal literatures, the Adivasi cultures, and all that. And as Professor Armstrong has said, we also have many testimonial literatures in India. We have many narratives, tribal narratives from different parts of India, and I'm sure these will really help in making our literature also more vibrant and more understanding to the contemporary world. So I'm very happy that our research scholars will delve on these topics and research on these contemporary issues than going back to the same old English canon. So I'm happy that Dr. Koteswarao has organized this webinar at a time when RSS scholars are thinking of new directions in literature. And I do hope that we will organize many more such webinars for our research scholars, and this will really enable our students and scholars to think, rethink, and understand the contemporary literatures. Thank you all for joining us in this webinar, and we will hopefully conduct many more webinars in the future. And I take this opportunity to thank the head Department of English, Professor E. Dilip, the organizer of this webinar, Dr. Koteswar Rao, one more colleague of ours, Dr. Bhavani, then Dr. Narsimha Rao, Dr. Subbaraidu, and also our administrators, our Vice Chancellor, Professor K.B. Chandrasekhar, our registrar, Professor Krishna Reddy, for helping us to organize this vibrant webinar in the Department of English. Thank you, Dr. Koteswara, for giving me this opportunity. Over to.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I have to thank you from the Department of English and Krishna University. And now I would like to invite Dr. E. Bhavani ma'am to say a word of thanks.
Okay.
Hello.
Hello.
Ma'am.
Hello, sir. Hello.
Carry on.
Okay, sir. Good afternoon to one and all. On behalf of Krishna University English Department, it's my privilege to propose vote of thanks to Professor Armstrong, sir. In his talk, he has precisely given description on fourth world literature, Canadian, European, American, and South American literature, consensus of aboriginality, backward economically people. He discussed about backward economically people, and he also referred author George Manuel and Gordon Brugestel, Anthony Paul, and he also discussed about difference between the post-colonial theories and fourth world literature theory, and four alternative terms used by Thomas King in his essays. He focused on the tribal literature, and that is the literature highlights on native and non-native expectations. And he also referred to author Retico, a brief description on her writings, I Lost My Talk. In this writings, he has given a precise explanation about this I Lost My Talk. And he also focused on Maori from New Zealand. He also told about Maori is also one of the official language in New Zealand. And he also focused on Linda Trivosi and her writings. He focused on Dalit literature about lower and higher birth and caste discommunities. And the only scholar who focused on caste and equalization is by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, sir. And he has given a brief description about Pandit Ayodhita Das, a great leader, and a brief note on ideologies based on Buddhism, religion, etc. And he has given a Canadian and Maorian understandings, and also about the South Americans, and a brief description about feminism in Europe and in America and in Africa. And he stressed more on testimony, and he also referred a text about written by Sharmila, a Dalit experiences. And he also referred a text Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. In his writings, uh, in their writings, they have given an eyewitness on Igbo culture. The writer himself is an eyewitness on Igbo culture, the perspective of one's own culture. This text refers on the perspective of one's own culture, and he has given a few examples on testimonial literature, and he concluded with the saying that literature must delight and teach, literature must liberate people who are suffering. Thank you, sir. Thank you for your elaborate, precise description about the talk. And I also thank for the ABN College management for extending their support to organize this webinar. And I also thanks the staff for extending their technical support. Thank you, one and all. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam, for your wonderful vote of thanks. So a few minutes, I'm going to conclude this webinar. I profusely once again thank Professor Rajshekhar Pateti, Professor Department of English, Achar Nagarjuna University, and Professor S. Armstrong ji, Madras University, Chennai, for accepting my invitation. Of course, I might have called them many a time for reminding and this and that. They have a lot of patience in taking my and talk to me. regarding the webinar. Thank you, sir. Thank you once again. And I have to thank our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, for encouraging me and encouraging the department to organizing these webinars like this. And I have to again thank Registrar Sir, Krishna University, encouraging me in particular and encouraging the department to organize the seminars and webinars like this, and also administration, all administrative officers in Krishna University. And Lord Basna, but not least, and I also extend my heartfelt thanks to all the participants. They have shown a great deal of enthusiasm and interest on the topic, the fourth world literatures, yesterday and today. Thank you all once again. Thank you so much. And the certificates will be issued after 2 days onwards. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you. And
I need 1 minute, Kodishwar, 1 minute.
Sir.
Okay, I thank you and Dilip, Dr. Usha, and all the faculty members. I also thank participants. They are all there. 150 members are there from the beginning. It is very, very rare to see such a very patient audience.
Exactly.
I respect their time and I respect their energy.
Enthusiasm.
I thank them for their enthusiasm and commitment for the academics. Okay, so I have one announcement to all of you, including Dr. Dilip and Dr. Kodishwar. The Department of English in Madras University has Center for Australian Studies, correct? And we have been conducting a webinar series by the Australian writers with the help of Australian Consulate General Office in Chennai. Okay, so yesterday we hosted one writer, Rasida Murphy, and we are going to have other webinar on 17th of November and also 6th of November. So we have two events, 6th November and 17th November. Okay, so I request all of you to join us. I also request all of you to direct your own students, research scholars, and your own contacts to join this online program on on 6th November and also 17th November. So I will email Professor Kodishwar. Kindly take this as my personal invitation and request your students, research scholars, and faculty to attend some please.
Sure,
Thank
sir.
you so much. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Have a nice day,
Thank
sir.
you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you all. Thank you all the
Surely,
participants.
sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you for showing a great deal of interest on the webinar. Thank you.
I don't see
సార్ కోటేశ్వర సార్
సార్
లింక్ అనేది షేర్ చేశారు చాట్ బాక్స్ లో ఫీడ్బ్యాక్ లింక్.
సార్
పార్టిసిపెంట్స్ అందరూ లింక్ అనేది ఫీడ్బ్యాక్ అనేది ఫామ్ చేయమన్నాను సార్.
సార్ ఆల్రెడీ పెట్టాను సార్ మెసేజ్ ఫిల్ చేయమని.
ఓకే ఓకే సార్
థ్యాంక్ యూ సార్ ఫర్ ఎక్స్టెండింగ్ యువర్ సపోర్ట్. ఐఎమ్ ఇండెటెడ్ టు యువర్ సర్వీసెస్ సార్.
ఓకే థ్యాంక్ యూ. అది ఒక 10 minutes అనేది వెయిట్ చేద్దాం సార్, వాళ్ళు ఫీల్ చేస్తారు కాబట్టి.
సార్
తర్వాత ఎండ్ చేద్దాం. 1 కల్లా 1 వరకు ఉంచుతాను.
ఓకే సార్.
తర్వాత అది క్లోజ్ చేద్దాం సార్. అప్పుడు ఎండ్ కొట్టేయమంటారు.
ఓకే సార్.
ఓకే థ్యాంక్ యూ.